Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right, well, good Wednesday afternoon, evening, depends where you are in this world. We are making our way through this text of Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha nature. This is written by His Holiness 14th Dalai Lama, along with Venerable Tutin children. And right now we're unpacking the 6 primary afflictions. So these afflictions give rise to all the other afflictions. And last 2 sessions, we really unpacked attachment. And today, we are moving on to anger. So let's take a look at anger. Oops, that's not what I want to look at. Try that again. There we go. So remember, an affliction is anything that takes you away from peace of mind. Believe it or not, the natural state of mind is blissful, luminous, non-conceptual, it's peaceful. Actually described as sukha, which is the opposite of dukkha. Dukkha is the afflicted sort of samsara that we live in. And so there's this peace, this natural state of well-being. And that's present, actually, if we're not caught up in stuff. As soon as we're caught up in stuff, then we're agitated. But when we're really focused on something, intently into something, especially something we're doing, like riding a bike, or some people for jogging, some people creating pottery, it's kind of like in a flow. You're in a flow. You're very peaceful. You have a real bliss about that, in a sense. But as soon as we start thinking about stuff, getting triggered by stuff, experiencing things, this very busy and active mind, we get afflicted. And there's these 6 root ones that give rise to all the others and create most of the problems. Attachment was the first. Anger is now the second one. Anger is a mental factor that, referring to one of the 3 objects, agitates the mind by being unable to bear or through wanting to harm the object or person. The 3 objects can be expanded to 9. So that's how we do things here. I'll keep it at 3, we'll make it 9. That 9 can be well divided to another 3, and we amplify. So, but the first 3 objects can be explained in this way. And instead of using he and she, I'm just going to use they. It bounces back. They harmed me in the past. So that's 1. They're harming me now. They will harm me in the future. So really focused on this person, harm me in the past, harming me now, harm me in the future, give rise to anger. They harmed my dear friend or relative. They are harming my dear friend or relative, or they will harm my dear friend or relative. They helped my enemies. They are helping them now, and they will help them in the future. Here, enemy includes people that we don't like or disagree with, as well as those who harm us or interfere with our happiness. Competition in some way. So anger functions to disturb our minds as the basis for harming ourselves and others. It involves us in destructive actions and increases suffering in the world. So we have these categories we can start to see. Hi, welcome, come on in.
Should I leave us?
Socks are good. So with anger, this is kind of obvious in one sense, right? If somebody's harming me, it's pretty easy to be angry. harming my friends, pretty easy to get angry. Helping my people I don't like. So believe it or not, some people don't like other people because they're of a different political party. That happens. Some people get angry at people just because they're of a different political party. So if they're helping someone we don't like or disagree with, or we perceive might be a threat to us, we'll have some anger typically. So these are these categories. And anger is based on a distorted attention that exaggerates or projects defects onto people and things. So we're always going to come back to this one main deal, is that I'm not seeing clearly. If I'm afflicted, I'm not seeing clearly. There's an exaggeration. End of the world, worst day ever in my life. You ever hear that one? Worst day ever. Oh my God, that was horrible. Yeah, sent you the wrong size shoes. It's terrible. Worst meal ever. Can you believe this? It's interesting how just in our daily language we exaggerate so much. But this gets really distorted. So anger is based on this distorted tension that exaggerates or projects defects onto people and things. Our minds create many reasons to validate our anger and give us a false sense of power in situations where we feel afraid or hurt. Anger has many forms, and several other afflictions are derived from it, including irritation, annoyance, frustration, hatred, rebelliousness, belligerence, resentment, vengeance, spite, cruelty, violence, and jealousy. And that's really important to remember. A lot of people say, I don't get angry, especially when they're angry. I'm not angry. It's funny when you hear that. I'm not yelling. But when you think about a spectrum of anger, it can go from simple annoyance or irritation or frustration all the way up to rage, right? And so all of these different descriptions here, can be on a bandwidth. So a very subtle form of anger can just be, a little bit of frustration. And that can go on a bandwidth all the way up to rage. Behind each episode of anger are many stories, conceptualizations proliferated by our minds, in which we impute motivations to people that they do not have, interpret actions from our own standpoint, and favor our own concerns while ignoring or demeaning the concerns of others. Although we may try to justify, rationalize, or deny our anger, the truth is that we are unhappy when our minds are overcome by anger. Sometimes we vent our anger to friends, hoping that they'll take our side. Yeah, I used to be really good at that. If they didn't, how could they be our friends? Other times, we speak or act in ways that harm others. Here, we can see the relationship of attachment and anger. The more distorted attention has exaggerated someone's good qualities, increases the strength of our attachment. The more distorted attention exaggerates that person's bad qualities when he or she doesn't meet our expectations. We become discontent, and this mental unhappiness inflames our anger, resulting in aggressive behavior that breaks the trust of people we care about the most. Anger is a mental state. It is not a behavior. While some of us may not think of ourselves as angry because we don't throw things or scream at others, inside our anger rages. In these cases, ignoring the other person or refusing to have anything to do with them may be considered harmful behavior. We should not be fooled into thinking that passive behavior, like withdrawing from a situation or refusing to communicate, indicates a lack of anger. So we're already unpacking quite a bit around anger and, that not responding, ignoring, I don't know. One of our dear friends in our groups, what was this term? You're dead to me. Yeah, I came up at a retreat once to use that. And, just examples of distorted views. When we think about someone that we're angry at, they did something to me. They did something that was just really a betrayal. It was, they're my best friend. They did this thing. And I can carry that for many years, right? But if we look at it, one example of how distorted we can be is I am angry now at someone that doesn't exist. The person who did that 10 years ago doesn't exist at all in that way of that person and who they are today, right? They're basically a caricature I have in my mind that I'm carrying for 10 years in my mind. Like they haven't grown, they haven't changed. They're still that self-centered jerk, and they've clearly never done anything nice in their life. And they probably won't even go to their own mother's funeral. They're so self-centered. Like, I have this whole thing around this caricature of a person who betrayed me and they're not trustworthy. And that person exists only one place, my mind. But, that's not what I think. I think I really hate this person, or I have resentment towards this person. What I really do is I have a resentment towards a caricature of a person in my mind based on an event that once happened to me in the past. And that person today, well, they're very different, right? I'm very different than I was 10 years ago. And if you had a resentment for the way I once was, you're not very capable then of being open to anything I am today. And I think all of us have probably done some things that were not our shining moments, right? And we've done harm and we've let people down. And there might be some people that have a resentment towards us, right? And not even knowing that, we've changed or, we've learned to be better people than we had in the past. And this one behavior, doesn't dictate who we are. And another real interesting example is our relationships, right? We have marriages. I can't live without you. Turns into I can't live with you, right? And how can someone we shared all this time with, and then now we can't be in the same room together. That happens with family members. It happens with friends. It happens with marriages. And what we start to recognize when you look at anger, it's always going to be based on a distorted view, but it's always going to be pretty self-centered. And the downside that they're pointing out is who's suffering? I am. I'm suffering. Not forgiving that person makes me suffer. Doesn't hurt them much. And then even if I do want to hurt them by ignoring them and they want to be near me, now, that's still I'm suffering. That's tension. They're in the room with me. And it's difficulty. There's no peace there. So anger, of course, does a lot of damage. We'll see what they have to say about that. But the distorted piece is the thing to understand, that the more that I can come back to how things actually exist, where anger actually exists. Anger is a mental state, right? Not the action. So my anger is here, not out there. You're not making me angry. You're triggering my anger based on how I think you should be or how I think it should be. And anger is going to pop up. And so what do we do with it when it does? Can we shift that? Can we experience it? Or are we prone to do harm as a result? Or carry it within and just burn ourselves up? That's really horrific. So always coming back, though, to the suffering, the mental emotional suffering arising from these exaggerations, whether it's attachment or the anger, the aversion. really going to be projecting onto that person or the event or that thing these qualities as though they're the source of my happiness or my pain. Now, if they're hitting you with a baseball bat, they probably are the source of your physical pain. There's no exaggeration there, okay? So there's the difference between physical pain, right, and mental and emotional struggle around what is happening and my exaggeration. We don't need to exaggerate someone beating us with a baseball bat. Someday I'll come up with a different. I always go to the baseball bat thing, don't I? Okay. I grew up playing baseball. So anger may also be a reaction to fear. So first, those are all the distortions now, coming from fear. When fearful, we usually feel powerless, whereas anger gives us a false sense of power by sending adrenaline coursing through our body. Although anger may sometimes seem to make us courageous, our behavior when angry seldom remedies the problem and usually makes it worse. So, the big issue always around what any affliction is the idea of differentiating the cause, which is not out there. Cause for mental and emotional factors is in here. I think things should be a certain way. I would like things to be a certain way. This is my view of the world. Here are my values. Here's how people should behave. Here's what's fair. Here's what's just. Here's, how things should be. Here's what I need to make me happy. And that's all very much within myself. Things out there trigger these emotions and feelings and thoughts. They get triggered. So they're sometimes it's called a secondary cause. I was always taught it was a condition that triggers, like conditions that give rise to something. But yeah, secondary cause. So it triggers these, and then the mental afflictive states arise. But if there's no view from my side, we always use the word seed. We don't have a seed of anger around a particular point of view. It won't get very angry because there's no seed for it. There's no seed that will arise anger. So a lot of people's humor can frustrate or piss people off, right? And somebody finds it very funny, somebody doesn't, right? Same words, same thing. But this person didn't really have that seed of judgment around that particular type of humor. This other person had some different experiences, and it's not funny at all. And so the seed was here for that around their view and what's happened to them in the past. And so when somebody's making fun of something, then we get angry, right? Somebody else didn't have that seed. They didn't have those experiences. They were raised around that kind of humor. And they think it's funny. So this is where it's really important to start to recognize and work with my own seeds of anger or attachment, and can I adjust to reality? Or do I nurture and grow certain seeds that are just going to trigger me? For example, we often will say, like that was unfair. That was unfair. A long time ago, someone taught me if you want fair, you go to the county fair. It happens once a year. That's where you'll find fair, okay? But life's messy, right? Life's messy for everyone. Nobody escapes messiness. We all have had things happen to us that were harmful, that were hurtful. We had betrayal. We had injuries. We've had things be stolen. Had violence. Maybe if we look at the world, we'll see that it's messy. And and that everybody's going to have some loss. Everybody's going to have some illness. And life's going to be pretty messy. But there can be a really strong view it shouldn't be messy for me. Okay. And there's a big reaction at that point. As opposed to, what if I understood that everyone in this world is trying to get their needs met, trying to be okay, and these harmful behaviors they're doing have arisen from their desire to be okay in some way, but they're raised with a very different worldview, maybe around a lot of violence, maybe in a household where crime is okay, or this is all right, or belittling people is okay, or and that's the culture they grew up in, and that's what they know, and who they are in that moment may be nothing like who they are 10 years from now, right? So they steal from me, or they beat me, or they do some harm, whatever it is that they're doing. That's really, if I look at it as an underlying cause of suffering, that they're inflicting this damage to themselves. They're never finding happiness and well-being. They don't know peace needs. They don't know the care and the nurturing that I have had. It doesn't make it okay, but what it does is it shifts from a mind saying I should never have negative things happen to in the world we live in, people often don't get their needs met in healthy ways. Lots of people breed hatred, and then I am less triggered because I understand that. I also understand that these people creating this harm are hurting themselves, often more than me. They're going to have to live with those results. If you believe in karma, you're also going to understand the damage they're doing. But if you just look at a human being, it's very few that any can have any peace doing things that are so unethical. Then they need to do the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. So a lot of damage. So in this sense, if I can respond with compassion instead of anger, compassion understands suffering, and I'm suffering because of the harm. Is it more compassionate to create anger, or is it more compassionate to create understanding and take the next healthy step to either get out of the situation, make adjustments to do things differently, hold someone accountable in a healthy way, move towards problem solving without the hatred arising. And we may find that we're going to be a lot more skillful, and we'll suffer a lot less, and we'll be able to set better boundaries, heal quicker, be more resilient, and not have to carry a lot of damaged wounds within us. And as I say that, I also don't want everybody to go out there thinking it's a big, scary world out there. I mean, when we look at the world, and this is kind of a tricky thing, when we see someone like yelling at someone, or a fight, maybe in a store or some place like that, it sticks out because it's not normal. Normally, everybody goes to the store and they stand in line and they check out. Normally, people get on the road, and even though they may think that other person's an idiot driver, they're not running them off the road. But there are sometimes where road rage happens, and it makes the news. And if we start paying attention to the news a lot, all we start seeing are these incidents. But the reason they're on the news is because they're not the norm. The norm is somebody follows people, pick them up, they help them out. People return wallets when they find them. People, show up and deliver food when somebody's sick. That we cooperatively live together all the time. And And there are these times, as the Dalai Lama says, the troublemakers are few in number, you know. And but if that's all I focus on, then my whole mind can say, those people are like this, and those kinds of people are like that, and you know, and then all these judgments come up, and I put people in categories, and you know, and I'm suffering. I'm suffering. So working with anger is in twofold path. One is, can I start removing some of the seeds of anger, which is around my perceptions and my center of the universe, my self-centered, my small view of the world and how it should be, and what I think would make me happy or not. As we all know, we can have a nice home, live in a nice place, have a car that starts, have good friends, and be abjectly miserable today. And yet my mind will tell me, if somebody messes with this house or that thing or this friend or that, you know, I'm not going to be happy. And I get all that and I'm unhappy sometimes, right? So we have this view about what we need to be happy, and it interferes with that. We're going to have anger. What if I knew that happiness has much more to do with how I'm living my life and what I do that's meaningful and doing things I feel good about, having purpose? And well, then I'm probably going to suffer less. Understanding that all of us in Samsara are suffering from afflictions and struggles and misperceptions, and we're trying to find happiness in ways that, you know, we just can't. And we exaggerate those qualities, and so anger arises. So anger is going to show up, you know, so what do we do with it? Can we learn from it? Can we move it to compassion? But I think the most profound thing I've ever heard about anger from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, a long time ago, he was asked, back when Thupten Jinpa was still a monk and a translator for him, he said, what's the best way to deal with anger? And his answer was, don't get angry. Which, you know, what his point is, once you're angry, now you're doing damage control. But the point was, let's remove the seeds before you get angry. So the time to work on anger is when you're not angry. When I'm not angry, I can start looking with compassion towards others. I can start bringing a more holistic view to the world we live in. I can start seeing the good that's around me. I can start seeing the struggles of others. I can empathize with people. I can recognize the true sources of my happiness and well-being. And I can cut through a lot of my exaggerations and work with those emotions. And so really the best time to deal with anger is when you're not angry. It's very hard to deal with it once you're angry, you know, now I'm kind of in it. And so his point is, you know, let's work with living in reality. Let's not exaggerate. Let's not project. Let's recognize true sources of happiness, true sources of suffering. Let's recognize the environment we're living in and live more accurately. And so in that way, we start first minimizing those seeds, shrinking them, and then start removing some of them. A lot of old views I had, I don't have anymore. And things that used to get me angry, well, they don't anymore because that's not my view anymore. And so we start filtering these seeds out if we live more accurately, live with more compassion. Yes, Chris.
So I'm having a little bit, some of these things I agree with 100%, but I'm having a little bit of an issue here.
Thank
yeah.
gosh. See how it works.
And so, because my first thought is that, you know, with this, someone who does have, you know, the continuum of anger going to rage,
Mhm.
right? If we're saying we're trying to avoid anger, then that can lead to secondary shame, right?
Mhm.
And my other comment is that, you know, if the Dalai Lama says the way to deal with anger is not to be
The
angry,
best way.
the best way. For some people, that can lead to just indifference.
Mhm.
And, you know, one of the benefits of anger is it's like, oh, there's something unjust and I can help reduce suffering, which would be compassion. But the other thing was just like, I don't want my nervous system to go to being angry. So I'm just gonna go, you know, meditate, do yoga and check out and kind of not give a shit.
Mhm.
So I think like, like you did talk a while ago about, a couple weeks ago about, valid anger is not justifiable anger. And there may be a reason why I'm angry.
Mhm.
And then using that as a tool to create change rather than, oh, I don't want to feel angry, so I'm just gonna go bliss out and watch, you know, Netflix or something, because I want to feel those emotions.
Yeah. So in all of these circumstances, they're saying, yeah, we're going to have anger. It's going to get triggered. But if I work on the root cause of it, then that anger doesn't arise. But if I am thinking I shouldn't get angry, well, that's a delusion, right?
So I
So,
think it's important to make that comment too, that we're going to be angry as part of the human condition, the samsaric existence, but what we do with it is
yeah,
and not beat ourselves up for doing
exactly. And that's what's being pointed out here is that these 6 afflictive states, these primary ones, create a lot of damage, which could create damage for shame, right? And then our views around that. So his point when he was saying, don't get angry, the best way is start eliminating some of the seeds of anger, which is something that you would do over time. It's a process, right? In a conditioned human existence, we're going to have all kinds of thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And shame, self-critical mind, all that is all harmful, right? It's all detrimental. And so based on all of these teachings, and they're saying here, don't hold it in, right? You know, don't just try to ignore it. Don't try to do that. We feel the anger and acknowledge the anger. And there can even be a really nice shift that goes from saying I'm angry to I'm experiencing anger. Right? That's a shift, right? Yeah, I'm experiencing anger right now versus I am angry. Now I'm identified with it, I'm enmeshed with it. Versus, yeah, I'm experiencing anger. Or even the capacity to say, right now is not a good time to talk. Yeah, I'm experiencing a lot of anger. And now I want to say something I'm not gonna, feel good about. And so so anger can also, as we say here, my view on anger can cause a lot of damage, right? Go to shame, or I should be like that. Or some people can't deal with confrontations very well, right? So they just want to go avoid, which is going to really cycle us down. The only part that gets really kind of tricky between like modern Western psychology and Buddhism around anger is, from a Buddhist perspective, there's really not a positive aspect to anger, right? From a Western psychology, it serves a purpose, right? And which in its human form serves a purpose, right? And so I was once in a 5-week training with a bunch of therapists and a bunch of Buddhists, and we're in 5 weeks, and we're going through emotional intelligence training. And here's this view and here's this view. And then I think of the Venn diagram and I go, anger happens. What do we do with it? That's the middle, right? It's going to arise, right? So what do I do with it? And I don't need to hold this view or that view. I can, and both views can help one work with reducing the triggers for anger. And both views can offer a way of working with the anger in a healthier way and not suffering as much, right? And so I like to focus on that part, right? But ultimately, in a Buddhist perspective, is that any of these afflictive states are unnecessary, right? Because we are identified as a human. And in a human condition, these things are going to happen. From a Buddhist view, you are much more than being human. And identifying with that Buddha nature, which will be later in this text, is the Buddha nature that is aware of being angry, aware of the humanness, aware of those experiences. And so it holds that door open, right? But your point is well taken. Being in the center of that then, I think, is the important thing. I think there's a lot of struggle and suffering, not just around anger, but when people don't feel good, they feel sad, or they feel this way, or they feel that way. Chris is a therapist, so here we go. And I don't know, I feel like something's wrong because I'm sad. Instead of humans feel sad, right? It's an expression of love. I don't need to go do something about it. Maybe I just need to know I'm feeling sad, and that shows that's an expression of love. I'm missing something. And there's so much in our world where we're not okay being not okay. Instead of a different perspective to go, yeah, it's messy. I'm going to have lots of feelings. I'm going to feel jealousy. I'm going to feel less than. I'm going to feel better than. I'm going to have these things. They all arise. And that's normal. There's nothing wrong, nothing broken. Yeah.
Just one point, Larry has his hand up. I guess you didn't see it.
Okay. Oh yeah, I don't. Okay, we'll get to you in a moment, Larry. So, how do we really start from a place of knowing that we're okay, and it's okay to have lots of feelings, lots of emotions, lots of these things arise without identifying with them in ways that are unhealthy. So, thanks for bringing all those up. And Larry.
I'm particularly challenged by people who say, what are you mad at? How come you're angry when I'm not? And I don't feel like I have to explain and react and go to my pouting chair or any of that. It's something that challenges me often. They think they know what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I used to read people's minds. You know, they said that, but I know what they really meant. And you know, and it's really a struggle when, you know, we all perceive people through our own experience. And we might perceive someone be angry when they don't feel angry and so forth. So what do you do in that situation, Larry?
Usually nothing.
Okay, a lot of nothing or just a little of nothing?
Well, examine internally, am I? Do I have a face that portrays what am I mad at? I might feel frustration in the situation and how to react or act or respond to the person of the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Or I call my sponsor.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. One of my responses to similar situations like that would be, I'm sorry, I'm unaware that I was coming across as angry, you know. You know, I don't feel like I am, but I'm coming across that way. I'm sorry. But and sometimes I was unaware. Maybe I was a little more agitated than I'm aware of. Sometimes they're reading me more correctly, sometimes not. But I think a good response for me has been, I'm sorry that I'm coming across as angry. I don't mean to. And that way it validates their experience of anger. And then allows me to try to express, you know, I was unaware of that. And, you know, don't really feel that anger at the moment. And then that way we're validating someone else's experience and being able to express your sense of not feeling that you were angry. Does that make sense? Okay, you said yes. All right, it's muted. Yeah. Might be something your sponsor would say. I don't know. I'm laughing because I'm his sponsor. Yeah. So if we can work with our triggers, what we may find, though, as Chris has pointed out so importantly, is a lot of my triggers are my own insecurities. And that was what was touched on here. A lot of anger will come out of fear, out of our own insecurities, our own worries, and my own voice, you know, of how I think I should be. And so self-acceptance is going to be root to all this. Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, one of our teachers, very, very strong motivation to always point out that in order for us to really tackle some of these things, we need to be okay first. So we really need to have a healthy sense of self to then begin the process of eliminating that self. And but if I have an insecure voice, and if I shame myself, or if I'm critical and all that, it's going to be very difficult to work with some of these. But as I cultivate a sense of my own value, of my own capacity, I make sure I get my needs met. I put myself in supportive environments. I do things that are healthy for me. I get healthier. I have some sense of self-worth and value, a good sense of self. Then I can go a little more deeply into these triggers and start eradicating some of them. You know, but if I need to meet myself where I'm at. But the big damning thing is always that self-critical voice. That's a lot. And if one last thing, if I compare myself to Dalai Lama, by the way, I'm going to lose. Yeah.
Earlier in the text, it mentioned that anger is not a behavior, it is a.
It's not the behavior. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm
So
confused by that. It's like, wait, isn't it behavior? If I'm feeling angry.
and they were trying to distinguish that, you know, throwing something against the wall or not doing something, anger could still be there, right? So I might be stoic and be angry, or I might be very demonstrative and, you know, throw something and fling it. They're trying to make the point. It's not. Don't focus on the behavior and the anger itself, right? So he's saying, and one of the most difficult things that we can do to someone is just cut them off in our life, right? Intimate relationships. I'm not talking to you. Shutting down, withholding, even communication. That's emotionally damaging, and so anger can show up in very different ways, and be really harmful. Yeah, so I think that was the context. I think they said it's like, don't think you're not being angry just because you're ignoring someone. You're ignoring someone because you're angry, and as one of our friends would say, you're dead to me. So, but the main deal here is always, well, can I work with these feelings? And are they based in something that's real or not? Okay, so for example, a person I have resentment towards, maybe I can start to recognize that person has changed and move on and done things, and can I find some forgiveness? In which case, I don't need to have that every time I see that person anymore. Can I recognize that, yeah, life's messy and, you know, things happen to people, and what would be a healthy solution here, right? And keep moving towards healing and resilience. So compassion seeks to remove suffering. Anger often incurs suffering. And the limitation with anger is your focus is very narrow. When you're angry, that's it. This is the thing. And you don't have a lot of options and a lot of choice, you know. You're not a good decision maker when you're angry. But when you're compassionate, then yeah, okay, we have a bigger view. What would be the healthiest thing here? What's going to get us through the pain? What's going to be a good way to respond? How can I work with someone I don't like? I'll have some options instead of just not liking them. So then you have a lot more view. I want to reduce suffering. Anger is suffering. I would like to reduce that. Compassion does that. So on the big like mountain of how if it was all just wonderful, I could always respond with anger, with compassion, right? But in reality, as pointed out, that's not really always going to be the case. It's like what's those little bikes you ride now before the training wheels? Striders. Yeah, it's like being a little strider thing, right? Now, you know, I want to learn how to ride the bike. Right now, I'm a strider, you know, and so I just start working in little ways with frustration and working with those things. I think the value in what His Holiness was saying was, if I work with those little things and work with patience, I'm not going to have as much anger as often. So when I'm not angry, I can be working intentionally on patience. So patience is to work with being uncomfortable, right? Being patient with others, being patient around frustration. So I can develop patience with small things, and I can start working its way up. And then in my spare time, I can, even if I have someone I have some issues with, I can take some time to work on that. When I'm not around them, I can start seeing some of their good qualities or start learning more about their behaviors and what may have caused them. And I can start to work with that. So I can start removing the underlying triggers within me. But I always need to meet myself where I'm at. It's not compassionate to beat ourselves up ever. All right, anybody else have any thoughts, comments, incredible insights, piercing wisdom, or jokes? Why? Not a big discussion group today.
Oh, there is a hand up with Chris and Richmond.
All right, Chris,
He is muted.
please unmute.
Hey, hey guys. Hey, John. I was man, this is so timely. I was actually listening to one of your previous Dharma talks on the foundations of the Buddhist path, which I think is an earlier book in the first book in the series. And I was having a bad week, like Monday, and man, I went for a walk in the park, and I literally went through this process of feeling like, why am I suffering? And I was sort of blaming my job, and I'd had a fight with my wife, and I was like, the source of my suffering are these external things, my wife and my job. And then I sat down and I was listening to your Dharma talk, and you were literally talking about something very similar, and you helped extend it tonight. I really appreciate it, because I started going into, well, maybe it's my reactions to these external things, like, you know, I have these sources of suffering. I react to them through unhealthy behaviors, the unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? And then I was like, well, that's not the end of the story yet. And I sort of, I think you mentioned the word expectation. Somewhere my mind hooked into that. So I was like, well, maybe I've somewhat, instead of being, you know, instead of my reactions to these external circumstances, which they do cause suffering. You know, if you drink or if you binge out on Netflix or run up your credit card, right, it causes suffering. But then I was like, well, I think there's a precursor, and it's my expectations that my spouse or my kids or my job are going to make me really happy, or they're going to be my ultimate source of happiness. These expectations, I started getting, okay, maybe there's a front end into this thing, right? And then tonight you started talking about, and that's where I ended. I was like, gosh, am I just not to have, should I just not have any expectations? Do I have unrealistic expectations around career, every aspect of a life, And I was like, that runs against Western psychology. But then you started talking about seeds and views and how those might be shaping our expectations and how we're entering into situations in our life. And that really helped me tonight. I don't know. Does that make sense? And then you mentioned compassion, I think, is sort of the vehicle for helping us change our seeds, because those seeds and views are malleable, and 10 years from now, we might be different than we are now. Does that sound about right? I mean, it's a lot going on there, but it really helped me in the moment to realize I'm more empowered than I think I am. And it's an inside job to changing how I relate to these things.
Yeah, no, I think well put. You're teaching next week, Chris. I'll put you on.
Come on, man.
Uh,
But it's still hard, like day to day. I still have these unrealistic expectations. Like when I get up in the morning, I have these pure expectations, and by about noon, I'm back in the thick of it.
yeah. Even after all these Dharma talks. Yeah. And the thing about expectations, I think they get a bad rap. Because we couldn't function without expectations, right? You expected there to be a Dharma teaching tonight. That's why we're here, right? So I love that Chris was pointing out unrealistic expectations, that my job's going to be a source of my happiness, that my partner is going to be this way, and my kids are going to be like that. Well, that is, just unrealistic at all levels. What would be realistic is that I could work on being a better partner. Well, that's realistic. I can work on, it's not the job, but how I show up for the job. Well, that's meaningful. And so really managing expectations in a way that are realistic and relate to true sources of happiness, which is always going to be much more related to how we show up in alignment with our ethics and our values. And if we feel good about what we're doing, not how it turns out. If it's on how it turns out, now that's the cause of all the stress, because I'm exaggerating that quality. And all of us know that how things turn out, we've had it go sideways a million times. We're okay. And we've had it go wonderfully a million times, and we could be pissed off. How it turns out is not matter of fact, a lot of research goes that's almost irrelevant. What's relevant is how I show up for it, whether it's meaningful, the efforts I put in, what are the motivations, and in my relationship, am I a good partner, and am I working to have a healthy relationship with a partner? And those are things that are realistic and that we can work on, and taking a little time to note the good qualities of your partner and reflect upon those. Maybe then I won't notice those little ones that trigger me.
Keep the whole picture. Keep
Yeah.
the larger picture in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Thanks,
so,
man.
yeah. So thank you, Chris. Yeah.
And then their center has their hand up too.
Okay, then in their center, that'd be Keith and Kurt.
We only did that once. I can't believe you can remember
Hey, the label stuck, baby.
that.
Well, the here and now people remember that kind of stuff.
I was just thinking, I want to have one emotion at a time. And I've always had this frustration with having, or I didn't even know I could have multiple emotions about something at once. But what I'm kind of noticing just now, my daughter called me in the middle of this talk, and my ex, her other dad, he's a problematic individual, and he sent her a big long thing intended to make her feel guilty, and she was feeling guilty, and I just listening to you talking and watching my emotions go through that. There's about 20 of them involved in that, and I think my default is to go. But anger's easier when I'm faced with that confusion. Sometimes it's like anger's like an opt-out. Right? I don't have to fight with the confliction between being compassionate and being, and feeling bad, my kid's feelings and his feelings and all of this stuff just gets overwhelming. And so I could feel myself, I could watch it arise, right? I was hitting the pig on the snout pretty hard, but just watching that anger arise, and it's like it's kind of like a default, I have to watch that. I've never realized that before, but I will get confused about what I'm feeling and opt for anger, right? Instead of some of the harder ones for me, like compassion, and some of those ones where you feel the sadness and I want to help and I don't know how, and all that stuff. And it's easier to just say, well, screw that. Right. Anyway, that's my thought.
Yeah, no, thanks for pointing that out. And, one of the things in the reading was we can have a temporary sense of power when we're angry, right? The adrenaline flows. It feels better, right? It's easier. And, rather than, the nuanced experience of those 20 emotions that you had, which, by the way, I'm sure they had subcategories of that 20, probably had, little subcategories of people.
I am a Buddhist now, so there's always a list of another 9 underneath all of each one of the categories.
One is another 3 that goes into another 3, yeah. And so, but yeah, really well put. I'm so glad you shared that. And what a gift it is now that that you're choosing to be more open to the total experience instead of the immediate easy one.
But the expectation is that will then then I get to watch my expectations around that. Then I don't like feeling all those things at once.
It's that song, feelings, nothing more than feeling. Trying to forget my feelings. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's that whole deal that we kind of mentioned earlier is somewhere in our psyche, we feel like we should just feel good. And I don't like it when I'm not. And that causes a lot of pain. And so learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable and knowing that feelings do serve us, right? And that we're not our feelings, that we're experiencing them. And, I know that when I think about how much more capable you are today to be willing to experience those feelings, it's very inspiring, Kurt. Really, really very inspiring. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. So I think a lot of us can relate to that. And how easy it is to get angry. And then what we do is we get validation, right? Of course I should be angry. So-and-so did this. And let me tell you what they did, And then, of course, and then we want to make everybody else angry. And then if you're not angry with me, what kind of friend are you? Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's really a pernicious thing there. All right, well, I hope it doesn't anger you if we wrap up. We've been going on for a little bit. But a rich discussion, we may need to do a little more on it, even though we came to the ends. But what I would like to suggest is that this week, maybe taking on the practice of patience. So in Buddhism, the antidote to anger, one of the main antidotes, is patience. If I can develop a skill of patience, and you know when the worst time to try to practice patience is when you're impatient. But if you start working with it, like consciously, I wake up and today I'm really going to work on patience. I'm going to notice irritability. I'm going to notice frustration. I'm going to just feel it. I'm just going to feel it and work with it. Well, then what happens is I develop a skill of patience. And then I have it when I need it. What happens is we need it, but I don't have the skill because, those minor frustrations are really a big deal. And now I'm impatient. But it's actually one of the 6 perfections: patience, fortitude, the capacity to be uncomfortable. And so if that's our primary practice this week, then we come back next week and we kind of see, okay, how am I working with that? And does it mitigate my sort of flare-ups of anger? And can I notice that more? So I would suggest that is a practice, one of the 6 perfections, patience this week. Okay, let's go ahead and dedicate the merit and wisdom that we have cultivated here today, our discussion on the affliction of anger. And hopefully its antidote, patience. So all of us have come together on this evening. We've engaged in teachings that have been passed down through the centuries, have been refined and practiced. And could have been doing a lot of things on a Wednesday night. We chose to work on our hearts and minds and engage in our lives in ways that are meaningful and productive. A great deal of merit and wisdom has been cultivated. Let us dedicate this merit for the benefit of all sentient beings. May they be free of suffering and for our own continued spiritual growth. With that motivation, those who care to can join in the dedication prayer. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha.